Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to get started. Thanks so much for tuning in to our Alumni New Venture Challenge Kickoff webinar. My name is Grana Kolar and I'm a Senior Associate Director at the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at the University of Chicago. I work primarily with alumni, organizing various initiatives and programs to help you guys go from starting your ventures to scaling your ventures. So if you have any questions that are alumni related, please send me an email. My email is provided here on this page. Before we get started, I do want to go over a few Zoom housekeeping items. So please keep yourself muted throughout the presentation. I've built in plenty of time at the end to answer any and all of your questions. So for the Q&A, you can either write your question in the chat function within Zoom, and I'll go through and read the questions out loud and answer them one by one. Or you can raise your hand via the raise hand feature or physically raise your hand and I'll be sure to call on you. Okay, so here's a screenshot of the Alumni NVC webpage. This website has all the information you would ever want to know as it relates to the program. We have all of our key dates and deadlines. We have sample applications or what we call feasibility summaries on this website. So please visit this website to get familiar with it. Check out our resources. Yeah, there's one other thing I want to mention about this side, but yeah, just make sure you go to this site. Oh yeah, we have an FAQ on our SAFE, the Simple Agreement for Future Equity, which is the investment tool that we use to invest in all of our startups. So we have a very lengthy document that answers all the questions related to the SAFE. Okay, so our agenda for this next hour is really to provide you with an overview of the Alumni NVC, its value and benefits, and how to apply. If you're joining this session more with an interest to mentor teams or just to get involved with the Polsky Center more generally, you're welcome to stay tuned for the rest of the hour, and please connect with me afterwards, and I'll find a way to get you plugged in. So I do want to start with a brief overview of the Polsky Center, because I know for some of you when you were students, maybe you were less engaged with the Polsky Center, or you were concentrating in other areas like finance or something non-entrepreneurship related. So I just want to make sure everyone's familiar with who we are and what we do. So at the Polsky Center, we focus on three key areas. The first is education, both inside the classroom and outside the classroom. The second is on launching companies, and the third is on commercializing research and technology that's being developed at the university laboratories by faculty and graduate students and undergraduate students. So we accomplish our mission by running the top-ranked startup accelerator in the United States, which is the Edward L. Kaplan New Venture Challenge, which you'll hear a lot more about in a moment. We operate a 34,000 square foot co-working space and incubator space that's on 53rd Street in Hyde Park, so about a mile north of the main campus. We also have a state-of-the-art fabrication lab in this space. The Fab Lab is currently open with appointments, but the actual co-working space is currently closed during the pandemic. We're still running a ton of virtual events and workshops via our team that normally sits at the Exchange. So we still have a lot of great resources available to students, faculty, staff, and alumni. We run the George Shultz Innovation Fund, which invests in early stage ventures. And then finally, we also manage the University of Chicago's technology transfer function. So we manage all the intellectual property that originates from the university. We also run about 500 events per year. So we're an active center and we try to cover topics that are of utmost interest to budding entrepreneurs and seasoned entrepreneurs. So we're here right now to talk about the New Venture Challenge. So the New Venture Challenge, the traditional program has been around for 24 years. And this year we're actually celebrating our 25th year, which is just astounding to say that number out loud, because if you think about some of the household accelerator names such as Techstars and Y Combinator, those have not been around for 25 years. So the University of Chicago has really been a pioneer in helping entrepreneurs and helping get startups off the ground. The New Venture Challenge is recognized as a top-ranked accelerator in the US, and it's been consistently ranked as a top 2 startup university accelerator by the Seed Accelerator Rankings Project that's run by a few researchers in the US, alongside Stanford StartX, Y Combinator, and Techstars. So there are a number of ways that the NVC is unique and where we set ourselves apart from the other accelerators. So I'll go through those here in a minute. So one thing, not only is there prize money that's available at the end of each of our New Venture Challenge tracks, there's also a ton of resources that get plugged into these programs. So here in the dark red box, I've listed out the 5 tracks of the New Venture Challenge. So there's the traditional New Venture Challenge, the Edward L. Kaplan, that's been around for 25 years. There's the John Edwardson Social NVC, which has been around for 10 years. And that track is geared towards ventures that have a social mission, that are more socially oriented or nonprofit. And that's run through the Polsky Center at Chicago booth. That one is open primarily to students. We sometimes will see alumni companies going through there if they have a student who's a co-founder and a main contributor to the company, but that is usually set aside for students. We have the Global NVC, which are for the executive Chicago booth MBAs who are studying around the world. We have a college track, which is for the college undergraduate students, and then the alumni track, which we launched 3 years ago, and which I know all of you are here to learn more about. So each of these 5 NVC tracks, again, they have a lot of resources. The Alumni NVC is a little more unique in that there's not a formal class component. So we can't make you guys sit in a class for 10 weeks. You already did that as students. So instead there's a sort of a self-paced structure to the program. So what you put in is what you get out of it. I'll go into some more detail on what that structure looks like, but the same types of resources are available to Alumni NVC as there are to the other tracks. So some data and numbers on our New Venture Challenge success. So, we've had over 330 companies that are still operating today that have come out of one of the NVC tracks. Hopefully you recognize some of the companies listed here. Our big one is Grubhub, which here in the US, it's the food delivery giant. We've got Braintree, which is the mobile payment technology that powers Uber and Venmo. Simple Mills, the gluten-free food company that's sold in all the large stores here in the US. Illuminate, the solar-powered inflatable lantern that was originally designed for disaster relief scenarios, such as in Haiti, but now is also marketed to hikers and campers. And actually my family and I have used Illuminate lantern when we go camping, and our little girls love it and like to push the button on and off, and it's effective for entertainment, but also for providing light. And then Ben and Frank, which is the Warby Parker for Mexico. This company is doing very well and have seen a lot of success in Latin America. The NVC has raised, rather the teams have raised over $1.3 billion in funding from top VCs such as Accel, Andreessen Horowitz, NEA, Benchmark Capital, Sequoia Capital, and Hyde Park Angels and Hyde Park Venture Partners. To date, the NVC teams have created more than $7.7 billion in exit value, and that value continues to grow. And as I mentioned, the program has really led to national recognition and as well as recognition within the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in the Midwest. So we are here again to talk about Alumni NVC. So I do want to start by highlighting the results from this past year. So we had an extremely resilient cohort that got accepted into the finals back in January, or rather that got accepted into the program back in January. And then they, went through some coaching and access to mentors, and then they learned that they would be pitching in a virtual semifinals pitch event in the spring. So they had to adjust quickly to that type of format, and they were all beyond impressive and inspiring. And we were supposed to have the finals in April, which got pushed back all the way to September. So just a few weeks ago, we were running the finals from last year. So we had 8 teams competing in that from all over the globe. They blew the judges away. That we had a few judges invest their own funds into the teams. So we went from a $100,000 prize pool to a $125,000 prize pool, which was really exciting. So I'll highlight some of the finalist teams from this year. So Speako was our first place team. They're a company that helps people with their public speaking. So I know I certainly will want to use their technology sooner than later. And then we have Neuropath that came in second place. They're located in Belgium, and they're a digital health platform that captures data from Parkinson's patients. And they help Parkinson's patients be more coordinated with their care team for all of their physical, mental, and social health matters. We had 3 teams tie for third place. So White Lab Genomics, which is also a European-based team. They are developing AI solutions to allow biotech and pharma companies to bring more gene therapies to the market at a significantly lower cost. Less Platform is a company based in Canada. Their vision is to reduce CO2 emissions and contribute to the reduction of road congestion nationally and globally by moving freight with lower, or rather with fewer resources. And then the other third place team that was tied for third place is SetU, which is based in Brazil. They're an online platform that delivers personalized vitamins, supplements, and other therapeutics with professional support. So, you know, I went through each of these companies to show the spectrum of industries that were represented and also regions. So we are industry agnostic with ANVC. We welcome all ideas that, you know, have been vetted and where you can show that there's interest from customers. So we operate the Alumni NVC in 6 regions globally, and I've highlighted those here. So in normal years where we can do in-person events, we've identified hub cities. So we've got 3 regions here in North America. We have the East Coast, West Coast, and the Midwest. And typically the hub cities have been Chicago, New York, and San Francisco. And those have been the cities where most of the CoChairs are based and where most of the CoChairs have their networks, and also where the semifinals pitch event is held. This year, the pitch event was held virtually, so those hub cities weren't as critical. I will note though, for the CoChairs, they don't have to be based in a particular, you know, hub city. This year, for example, from the Midwest, we had CoChairs that were primarily from Chicago, but also one that had relocated to California. So he was pulling in from some of his network from both the Midwest and California, and even abroad. And then if you're a team that's based in, you know, let's say Russia, you could apply to any of these regions. It really depends on where your market is, where your customers are, where you're hoping to build connections, and where you're aiming to fundraise. So we have certainly received applications from teams in cities and countries that are, where they're applying to a certain region where they may not be physically located or incorporated. If you have any questions about that, we can go through that at the end. Now, the CoChairs are a phenomenal group of alumni. So they are your peers who have volunteered their time to help shepherd the teams along throughout the program. So they're the ones who are responsible for reviewing applications, selecting teams who move forward into the program. They dig deep into their networks and they find mentors who would be good for the teams, and they make those introductions. And then lastly, the CoChairs organize the semifinals pitch event, meaning they recruit and secure judges who are typically investors or serial entrepreneurs or people who have deep industry expertise. And those judges listen to all the teams' pitches and ask questions and give feedback. And I do want to really highlight this because this type of opportunity to get in front of investors at a typically early stage is really challenging. You know, if you're out in the world building your business, it can take some time to get in front of these types of people. So we really do see this as a huge value add to the program. Okay, so what is our eligibility criteria? So I've listed out here all the main ones, and I've highlighted the 3 really important ones. So the most important is that you must have a team lead who is a University of Chicago alum, meaning that you have a degree from the university. So unfortunately, certificate programs do not constitute a degree, neither does the executive education program offered through Chicago Booth. If you have any specific questions about whether or not you qualify, please send me an email. We can discuss one-on-one. Another key criteria is that the venture needs to have less than $1 million in annual revenue in US dollars, and also less than $1 million in funding raised, and that's institutional funding. So if your company has grant funds for, for example, research and development, that is around the 1 million mark or even more, then you would still qualify because that's money going into the R&D. And then the third key criteria is that you can only apply to one of the 6 participating regions. So you can't submit your application to all 6 regions. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but really be thoughtful about which region you want to apply to. So all of our NVC programs are split into 3 phases. So right now we're in phase 1, which is when you're thinking about who your team is, who you're going to apply with, you're doing your customer discovery, and you're putting together your application or feasibility summary, as we call it. So that feasibility summary application is due on January 5th, so right after the start of the new year. We also ask for a 2-minute video to be submitted by each team, and this is really to give the reviewers a chance to see who the team is and to hear from you. These videos do not need to be fancy. We've had teams record with their iPhone. Again, we just want to hear from you, see that you're a real person, that you're committed, and just hear you articulate your business model. The application will go live on November 9th on our website. The website is chicagonvc.com, and you'll just want to navigate to the Alumni NVC section. So you can get started as early as next month. Okay, so phase 2 is the meat or the tofu portion of the program, depending on what your protein preference is. And this is really where you make strides in your business model development. This takes place from early February to late March, April. So during this phase, all the teams have access to 3 key resources. The first is the Polsky Center Canvas website. So this is where we will be posting a lot of our recorded workshops and learnings that are held, or rather that are done by our faculty and some of our entrepreneurs and residents. And the topics range from how do you split up your equity as you're starting your company, to how do you put together a compelling investor pitch deck and tell your story, to how do you put together a marketing strategy. So it really runs through the gamut of the topics that early stage ventures are thinking through. The second resource is mentorship. So as I mentioned before, the co-chairs in each of their respective regions are responsible for introducing each team to at least 2 mentors from their network. And the co-chairs play a critical role here because, me sitting here in Chicago at the Polsky Center, or one of my colleagues, we might not have the most robust network in, let's say Singapore, or in Croatia, or or in Denmark. So we're calling on our co-chairs who might either be located in those areas or have done business in those areas, have business partners there, to pull from their network and to help the teams who might have markets in those places. And then the third piece is the regional semifinals pitch. So this again is organized by the co-chairs. They recruit the judges. They will help the teams get ready for that semifinals pitch event. The Polsky Center is, of course, always available to come in and step in and help if any of the team's needs are not being met. But you'll certainly want to look to your co-chairs for to be the primary contact for this phase 2 portion. And then phase 3 of the Alumni NVC is the finals event. So one thing I should have mentioned, so during the semifinals pitch event in each of the 6 respective regions, the judges will select 1 to 2 teams who will move on to the finals. The finals will be held on May 6th. We still don't know what format it will be. Might be virtual, might be in person, although in person is, we won't know until closer to the date, but we'll certainly inform all the teams with the right amount of time. I anticipate most of the semifinals pitch events will be virtual to accommodate for teams who are, who might not be located in those hub cities. So the finals event, we have $100,000 available in funding. We may have more, depending on if some of the judges decide to put in their own money. We use the simple agreement for future equity to make our investments. So this is a standard convertible equity investment that's used by a lot of accelerators and investors, such as Y Combinator. The investment converts to preferred stock at the occurrence of your next round of funding. And the terms are the same as that next round. It's not traditional preferred stock or a convertible note. And again, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we have a lengthy FAQ document on the Alumni NVC website that goes into all the detail about our SAFE. So please be sure to check that out for any questions. And if I'm also happy to take questions at the end here. So non-disclosure agreements, we do not ask any judges or staff or co-chairs or mentors to sign NDAs. We actually find value in talking about your idea to get feedback. Of course, if there's any secret sauce or intellectual property that you're not supposed to be disclosing, you shouldn't be doing that anyway. If any of your documents are confidential, such as the application, please be sure to mark as confidential when you're submitting. Your applications are only reviewed by a handful of reviewers anyway. We don't post them anywhere. But if you do list them as confidential, then they'll certainly treat them as such. Now, of course, if you have any NDAs between your team, that's something that you would handle within your team. But again, we do not ask any of our judges, co-chairs, any program organizers to sign any NDAs. So the application consists of some questions, and we ask you to be thoughtful in answering these questions. There is a 5-page limit, so you want to really get to the point. I will be doing a webinar that will go into more detail on the feasibility summary late in December, so stay tuned for that. We also have a recording from last year that's already posted on the Alumni NVC website, so you could check that out. It'll be all the same information. But essentially, you'll be answering, what problem are you solving? What's the solution? Who is your customer? So this is really important. We want to see that you've de-risked the idea to some extent, and that you have identified a clear customer who has signaled that they would be willing to pay for your product. You might already have paying customers, which is even better, but we won't assess the application on, depends on the industry. If you're in biotech, it takes much longer to have paying customers, but you need to prove that you've done your customer discovery, you've talked to the right people within the problem area, you've talked to the key decision makers, not just, like the end user who it wouldn't even pay for the product. So you have to talk about what the market size is. The reviewers want to get a sense of what the opportunity is. Talk about your competition. It's always a red flag when a team says there's no competition, because that just cannot be the case. There's always some competition. So be sure to include that in your application. Talk about how you will make money. So what's your revenue model? Who's your team? So this is also extremely important. We want to see that there's a solid team who can execute on this business model. And again, one of the team leads needs to be a UChicago alum. So we don't want to see teams applying and pulling in a UChicago alum just for the purposes of this program. And then once it ends in April, that alum just fizzles out and is no longer involved. And we do check each application to make sure there is in fact an alum who's a team lead. And then why will this particular team and company succeed? So again, you're talking about what have you done to date to de-risk the business, what types of stakeholders have you talked to, who are your advisors, and what expertise does the team bring? So this is the timeline for this year's Alumni NVC. The application is due January 5th, so you still have some time to put together your team, to apply, and to submit. The reviewers will have 2 weeks to read the applications and score them, and we will notify all the applicants on January 25th on whether or not you've been accepted. For the accepted teams, you will go through phase 2 of the program from early February to late March. So you've got about 2 months to really do your business development and make progress. So 2 months is not a ton of time, but I think when people have deadlines, they tend to make a lot of progress. So we've seen tremendous progress made in this short period of time by previous teams. So again, during this phase 2, you'll have access to the 3 key resources. So the online content, the access to mentors, and then the semifinals pitch event. And then the semifinals pitch event will be in late March or early April. Those dates will be determined sometime in January by the co-chair groups. So we'll notify all the teams of those exact dates in January. And then from the semifinals pitch event, there will be 1 to 2 teams selected from each region who will be making it to the finals, which will be held on May 6th. So that concludes the formal part of the presentation. I'd be more than happy now to answer your questions. So again, if you have a question, please feel free to type it in the chat, or you could raise your hand and I will be sure to call on you. You can also unmute yourself and ask a question because I don't see any hands being raised. There's got to be questions. If not, that tells me I was super thorough, but I'm sure I didn't explain something in the greatest detail. Go for it.
What is the difference between the Accelerator and then the NVC, this ANVC?
Sure. So the Accelerator is, and I see we have some folks who've been through Accelerator on this call. So the Accelerator is a pretty involved 10-week-long summer program where the teams are working full-time on their ventures. The teams they each get $10,000 investment from the Polsky Center. They get access to the Polsky Exchange space so they can work out of there. They get access to a dedicated coach over those 10 weeks. There's weekly workshops and lectures from faculty and our entrepreneurs in residence. So it's a truly like all immersive program. The Alumni NVC, we've had teams apply where the alum was not 100% committed to the business. They were still, feeling it out, and maybe they had, another part-time job. Now that, it's always good to be 100% in any venture that you're working on. But it can also be a test if you're trying to figure out whether or not to go all in into your venture to go through the Alumni NVC program. So again, the Accelerator is an all-in, like all hands on deck type of accelerator program versus the Alumni NVC. It has less structure and it's more about what you put in is what you get out type of program. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I think. Okay, no problem. So I see some questions in the chat here that I'm going to go over. So if you've applied in a previous year, can you apply again? Yes, so you can certainly apply again. Now, if your company has already gone through one of the NVC tracks in the past, then that same company would not be eligible to apply. But if your company, or I'm sorry, if you went through one of the NVC tracks, like the GNVC, SMVC 10 years ago, and now you have a new company, then you can certainly apply with the new company to the ANVC. So can you speak a little bit more about the resources available in the West Coast? You mentioned a co-working space in Chicago, wondering if there's something similar in San Francisco. So each of the regional resources is going to vary by region, and that's really dependent on the co-chairs. The co-chairs at a minimum have to meet with you and introduce you to some mentors in their regions, and then they organize a semifinals pitch event. I know last year and the year before, our London co-chairs were extremely active, and they would put on different speaking events for the teams and networking. Again, that's not a requirement by the co-chairs because, again, they're doing this in their free time as volunteers. So again, it will vary. We don't have access to any co-working space, not to my knowledge, in the West Coast. That's something you could check with the co-chairs, depending on what relationships they have with different companies out there. I know that Chicago booth has a alumni relations team in San Francisco. They do have some space, but I don't think it's being used right now with the pandemic. Everyone's working from home. And even the co-working space here in Chicago that the Polsky Center has is currently closed. physically, but we still run a ton of events and workshops virtually.
What have you seen be the common characteristic among the most successful teams in the New Venture Challenge, whether it be alumni or in the other flavors of the challenge?
So you mean when they're applying or once they're already in the program? Or both?
I mean in the applying and getting into the program, although it would be interesting to hear both.
Yeah, so I would say across all of the 5 tracks, it's so important that you've done your customer discovery and that you can write about all the customers you've spoken with in person or through Zoom. You know, doing surveys is okay, but it's not the most effective. People fill surveys out super quickly versus if you're talking to someone in person or on Zoom, you can get a sense of their, you know, body gestures and their facial reactions to what you're telling them about. You ask open questions so that they can really tell you what their problems are, and you can glean insights on where there are opportunities within their current workflow systems. So those are always the most compelling. If someone can say to us, I've spoken with 30 customers if they're B2B, or I've spoken with 100 customers if I'm B2C, and these customers have told us XYZ. I have pain points in these certain areas, and we believe your product would solve some of those pain points. So those are, I would say, the most compelling in the applications. If a team applies and they really don't even have a clue who their customer is, then that just, it doesn't look good. And anyone can apply with any idea, but you need to put in some work and figure out who is actually interested in what you're developing.
Okay. And then once they're part of the challenge, what makes teams successful getting beyond that? We know our customer, now what do we do?
Yeah, so I would say being laser focused on what problem you're solving and to whom. I've seen teams run into trouble where they will try to boil the ocean and try to solve, try to be a solution to 10 different types of customers. And when you're early stage, you just don't have the resources to do that. And you have to be laser focused, get your name well known with a certain subset of customers. And then you can think about expanding once you've got repeat customers and you have those relationships built. So again, I think being focused, really showing that you have gained traction with a particular customer segment, and then being able to communicate that to the judges and to your mentors. I know that, in this past year, there were a few teams that during their presentations, the judges weren't even clear on what problem they were solving. So, you just need to be ultra clear in communication, and sometimes being able to compare yourself to, to a big existing company that everyone can relate to can be a powerful way to explain what you're working on, especially if it's, like a more esoteric niche area that a lot of people don't have expertise in. So yeah, being clear and focused, I would say, can get you a long way.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. There's a question here. Can we reach out to the CoChairs before the application deadline? So we're still in the process of finalizing all the CoChairs. Once we have them all secured, they will be listed on our website. And you're certainly welcome to reach out to them before the application deadline. They will really get into their CoChair mindset in early January when the applications come in, but I'm sure they'd be happy to answer an email or possibly take a meeting with you, depending on what your ask is. Any other questions? There's a question on ballpark odds of getting in. So I have numbers from the last 2 years that will hopefully give you some sense of acceptance rates. So the first year of the program, we had 85 applications, and I believe 35 teams were accepted. So that's like a third or higher. And then last year we had 55 applications and 29 teams were accepted into phase 2. So that's a little higher than a third. So hopefully that helps. And actually across all of the NVC tracks, the acceptance rate tends to be about 30%. And we don't tell any of the regions that they have to accept a certain amount of teams. It's up to the co-chairs. They're looking at, have you answered those questions that I showed in a previous slide? Do you know what your problem is? Do you know who your customers are? Do you have a business model? Do you have a revenue model? So they're assessing that. They're assessing, do they have the right expertise and the right people in their networks to help the teams out? So yeah, there's a few things at play, and typically the reviewers will leave feedback when they're reviewing the application. So let's say a team doesn't get in, we're always happy to share feedback on why they didn't get in. All right, I'm gonna wait one more minute, see if any other questions come in, and then I'll give you guys 20 minutes back to your day. And if you have if you have an idea that you're thinking of applying with, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to talk with you and figure out if it's a good fit for the program, or what you might need to work on to get it in like a competitive, good stage to apply. All right, well, thanks so much everyone for sharing some time with me today. Again, it was a pleasure being with all of you, and hopefully I'll see some of your applications in early January.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Be safe, be well.
You as
Thanks,
well.
Brianna.
Thank you.